Welcome to the Elikus podcast. This is class number 11 in the discourse Shlach Lecha Anashim, which is the fifth discourse in the great book, Shasha Hekdimu 5672. So we are holding over here class number 11. Now, I've been a little bit missing in action. It's been 2 weeks since I gave the last class. That's because I was traveling. I hoped I would be able to do some during the travel, but a mixture of the jet lag, which was quite strong, because you go to the other side of the world. I was in Israel, which is totally opposite of here. The various different speaking engagements that I had, I did speak quite a bit, and all of that, and not having the menuchas hanefesh really to sit down, and these are not easy classes to give. So all of that didn't come into actualization that I should give the classes. But now I'm back here, and hopefully we have a nice stretch, and we'll be able to continue consistently and exploring where we left off. So this is exciting. So again, this is class number 11, and it's a good day for number 11. Today is the 11th day of Shvat, which we spoke so much in the other classes about the significance of number 11, so I was happy that it turned out that class number 11 is the class number 11 turns out on the 11th day of Shvat, okay, which is the Rebbe's day of accepting the leadership of the Jewish people. Okay, this is also it is I think the sixth class. We're in the middle of Chapter 19. Chapter 19 is turning out to be, in the overall book, this is a pretty deep chapter, especially what we're going to be learning the next 2-3 classes over here. So let's delve right in. I hope with Hashem's help, we need a lot of divine assistance to be able to crystallize this to come out. These are ideas that sometimes, as I sit down to teach, I'm still not comfortable with it. I don't feel that I've fully mastered it, but sometimes the only way to master it is to actually teach it, and while you teach it, it crystallizes. Okay, so we were learning in the whole. Just to reconnect. I need this for myself to reconnect to what we were the last subject we were learning. Because in chapter 19, as he's discussing the state of. Once he's developed that there are what's called, that the oiros, the lights, are not utterly pashut, they're not utterly simple. And the lights, even the lights that are in the kelim, that are in the vessels, in the sphirot, and even when they are in the kav, they're in a much higher state. Even before they get divisible in the vessels, they're still already predisposed to 10 powers. And even before the Tzimtzum Arishon, that's the wild idea of it here. Even before the Tzimtzum, there is the element of 10 hidden spherois, Esa spherois agnuzois, the 10 hidden spherois that is in the Or Ein Sof. However, in this chapter, he's trying to explain what kind of an existence do they have when they are in the Or Ein Sof. Obviously, over there, you can't differentiate between one and the other, and that's the point that he's making. They exist, however, as he said, they exist in a non-existent state. And even if they're opposites, like fire and water, they can coexist together in the same space. They can be completely one with the other, although they're different powers. But the powers, when they are in such an essential state, he explained, are so refined, so elevated, so elegant, so abstract, that you don't even notice the characterizations of the differences between one and the other. And when they are in such an abstract state, they don't clash with each other. They can sit together. That means in the nefesh itself, in the soul, in the Or Ein Sof itself, it's not like you have, this is the place where the power of chesed is, the power of kindness is, and this is the place where the power of gevura is, the power of discipline is. Or rather, they're all one with the Or Ein Sof, without any differentiation one from the other, because and he gave an example from the kochos, the powers of our powers of our neshama, the powers of the soul. Once those powers manifest in the body, each power goes into a particular vessel, like the power of vision. The power to see is in the eyes, the power to hear is in the ears. But when the soul itself, when these kochos, when these powers are in the soul itself, the power of vision and the power of sight are not two different places in the soul. They're all one with the soul itself. So similar to that is the idea, but obviously on an infinitely higher level, how it is in God. That the kochos, the powers, these esse, oiros of the esse spheres agnuzos, albeit that they exist already, but their existence is so high and so they're so refined that they're subtle. The point of it is the subtlety, but the subtlety is like it's like subtle, yeah, subtle as we get, even more subtle than that. It's always even more refined and subtler than what we thought it is, and to a point that you can't even notice it being this or it being that. Then it just integrated into the soul itself. Yet there is a higher level in the soul where we don't even see integrated powers in the soul. It's just the soul itself prior to its integrated powers. And in the Or Ein Sof, it's also that way. This that we say there are 10 hidden spheros is a lower level of the Or Ein Sof, so to speak. But then there is a deeper, more inner level of the Or Ein Sof, where over there, we discussed earlier, there is spheros ein kates. There is infinite amount of spheros. We can't point to 10 hidden potentials. Because even this that we point to 10 hidden potentials means it's already in existence. But it's in a non-existent existence. It's so non-existent and so non-defined that they don't clash with each other. But yet they're there. Okay. Now, if we use this idea, and we go back to the metaphor, and the metaphor was from our powers, the powers of the powers of the soul before they register in the body, when they're all within the soul itself. So the powers are indistinguishable one from the other. He's giving an actual, and he gives an actual experience when we experienced our powers in such a lofty state. In other words, not just do we have to accept that that's the way it is, because the differentiations are only when when the soul encloses itself in the body, and the powers become activated to become actualized, and then each one becomes pronounced in its own unique way, and it needs its own matching vessel. And they're taking place in different places in the body. But as we said earlier, but we understand that the soul itself is not divisible, and therefore, when the powers, and we also know that the souls must stop, that the powers of the soul must begin in the soul. So therefore, we kind of come to a conclusion that the powers exist in the soul, but when they exist in the soul, since the soul is not divisible, they're all unified and one in the soul. And to so much the degree that the opposite powers can kind of just be completely enmeshed one with the other. It's not even so much that they're mixed, they are just indistinguishable one from the other. So they are mixed with each other. Okay? Now, we accept that, but do we ever experience that? Do we ever experience the powers of our soul while they are still embedded in the soul, before they emanate outward into the vessels? So we'll say, in our lives, no. We never have an experience of the powers when the powers are still in the source. Because we don't experience our soul, the naked soul. We experience our soul and all of our soul activity via the body, through the body. But he explains that there was such an experience. And when we say it was an experience that happened once in history, and being that we were all part of that experience, because sages tell us that everybody was standing at Sinai, and since at Sinai every single one of us was there, because all the future generations were there, so this means that we all had this collective experience as a people. We were all there and experienced this experience. What happened? By the giving of the Torah, since God revealed himself by the giving of the Torah, the essence of God revealed himself, so the essence of our souls also revealed themselves to our consciousness. In other words, into our consciousness was revealed our very being prior to our. In other words, we usually experience ourselves through many filters. Our soul, our consciousness is already a filtered consciousness because it's a blend of the soul integrating into the body. And the reason for that is, and that's the way God also, because we're created in the image of God. God does that as well with the world. The world is considered then the body. The universe would be the body of God. The Sphirot would be the inner body of God. And then there is God himself. And generally the lights, the emanations of Hashem into the world is all through a filtration. However, by the giving of the Torah, God removed the filters and he himself emerged into creation. As he did that, it happened to our souls as well. Our souls emerged into our consciousness. And as a result of that, it brought all the 10 powers of our soul into our experience while they are still embedded in the soul. In other words, we got to experience the Eses Spheres Hagnuzos, the 10 powers of our soul, because we also have 10 powers. We got to experience them as they are still in the soul. We also got to experience our chushim. The 10 powers are also our chushim. Our chushim are our senses. The power of vision, hearing, and so on and so on. That's not part of the 10 powers, but that's related to the 10 powers of the soul. But these are our 5 senses: taste, hearing, smell, seeing, and seeing, hearing, smell, touch, and so on. But we got to experience all of that as they are in the soul itself. And as a result of that, we experience kind of a crossover. What did we learn earlier? That the powers are mixed with each other. And they're indistinguishable one from the other when they are in the soul itself. So he says, where did we have such an experience? At Sinai. Because what happened? The verse says, there's a verse. It's this week's parsha, so everything is appropriate that we're going to be exploring this week. It says in the verse in Exodus, Parshas Yisroel. I don't have the actual verse in front of me now, but it's towards the end of the Torah portion of Parshas Yisroel. It says, "V'chol ha'am," and all the people, roim es hakolos, they saw the sounds. Which is a really strange thing to say. You don't see sounds. You hear sounds. It says there were powerful sounds. There were thundering noises at Sinai. It was something otherworldly. So whatever those sounds are, the powerful thunder and lightning that happened, because the entire world went haywire. Or deeper than that, the sounds are God's speech. But it doesn't say that people heard the sounds, God speaking, or the thunder it says they saw the sounds. So the sages deduce from here that by the giving of the Torah, there was a crossover of our experience. We usually hear sounds, and we see sights. The sages say, during the giving of the Torah, we had a crossover, that we saw sounds, and we heard sights. Now it's interesting. This that we saw the sounds says explicitly in the Torah, Roen Asakolos. The fact that they heard the visuals, that doesn't say explicitly, but the sages do deduce that. The Rebbe talks about it in a sikha, in a very fascinating sikha in this week's Torah portion. Where do we know that from, and so on and so forth? Because according to that, it says Reuven, they saw the sounds, and we'll say the esalapidim and the flames, they heard the flames, not they saw the flames. So what was usually a sight was experienced as an audio. So over here now we understand what was going on. That was not just a game that God was playing with them, saying, "Hey, let's do something really cool, so you guys remember this event." What we're learning over here is that it was a natural consequences of the giving of the Torah. Since the giving of the Torah was the revelation of the essence, and the words that he uses over here is lamaylam and ishtalshalos, God was operating above the filtration of ishtalshalos. Ishtalshalos means the powerful system that God sets up where there is an evolution. And in order for things to evolve one from the other, everything evolves in a very controlled manner. And that's because God sets up circuit breakers. He sets up millions and billions of filters and screens to filter things. And therefore, things, evolve. But by the giving of the Torah, there was a revelation from beyond that. And therefore, the whole system kind of crashed. And we experienced reality from above and beyond the system. But as we discussed earlier, we experienced essence, including our essence of our own being, and over there the rules don't apply. And the seeing and the hearing were together. So he wants to, the Rebbe is over here using this as an example to show us, because this idea that the powers are so differentiatable and different is when they emerge outward through the filters and projection, when they go into a state of projection. But when they're in their source, because they're so subtle in their source, then the power of vision and the power of hearing are one. And therefore they can cross over, that the seeing can do the hearing and the hearing can do the seeing, because they're so undifferentiatable. That's the idea. So now, this is what we learned, and we actually learned this, but I didn't explain it so thoroughly in the last class. So now we're going to start. Now he's going to do a parenthesis over here. He's going to do a big parenthetical. He's going to explore this phenomenon, and it's really phenomenal. Let's learn it together. So this is on top of page Lamed Aleph, if you're using the same print of mine, which again is the big blue 3-volume book. On page Lamed Aleph. And he objects over here. He says, hold it. This doesn't seem to be that the powers are just sitting together in one spot. This seems to be that there's something happening over here that's even more than that. Because if all that it is what we discussed earlier, that in the soul itself, the powers exist, but they're not contradictory to each other because they exist in such a unpronounced state. They're so elegant and refined that they don't have to exert their differences. They can be silent. They can be kind of unassuming, if you might say. But if all that it is, it's unassuming meaning, it would mean something like these two experiences can happen completely simultaneously, and one does not encroach on the other. It's like if you're seeing and you're hearing, it's like two experiences. I wouldn't know, again, it's hard for me. I was just thinking about this. I don't have a perfect experience because to illustrate what it should be like if all that it is the unity of the powers being completely unified. The Rebbe is going to tackle over here, it seems like not that they were unified, but that the powers themselves flipped. Each power did the function of the other power. So that's much more than we were saying earlier. We're saying earlier that vision is vision, and like we said before, kindness is kindness. Severity is severity, two opposite powers. But while they're still in this abstract state, they leave room for each other. They can both sit in the same space without splashing one at each other, without clashing. But not that one power does the function of the other. That seems to be already something more. That means that every power is going out of its essence of what it is. It's almost like ceasing to be what it is and becoming something else. So that's what he's asking over here. And at first glance, this seems to be more than just a unity. So a unity, let's say you talk about two people that always have different opinions. So you bring them into the same room and they sit together. And they're not fighting. But another thing to say that each one starts behaving in accordance to what the other does. Like we learned earlier, we had such a concept. We were learning how Shammai, when we were learning the concept how the achlifu, how the oiros, the lights can go into opposite vessels. So we learned the idea that each one takes on the opposite role. But there it meant that the light went into a different vessel. Here we're talking about the energy itself is flipping. Not in a different vessel. The energy of chesed itself is not being chesed, is being gevura. In our case, vision, the power of seeing, is hearing, is doing the action of hearing. The power of hearing is doing the power of seeing. So that's what he's objecting. So this seems even more than just the revelation of the essence where the powers are the 10 hidden spheres, hagnuzais, where the powers exist, and once they exist, each one has its particular function. Then at the best, they would sit together without contradicting each other, but not that they do the opposites of what they need to do. But by the giving of the Torah, we see something deeper than that happen. This is more than the unity and the hisarvus and the mixing anal. Share kol koyach, because every power poyal peula hafeches is doing an opposite effect of what it is. Each one is doing the function of the other power that's not it. Earlier we explained the concept of them being mixed. Hurak is only this that they dwell together. They're not distinguishable. They're not recognizable. Because they don't have yet an image. They're not yet formed in a particular form. But each one is still kindness, and severity is still severity, or judgment is still judgment. But over here we see the power of vision. That's what we're saying. Royim, they saw. That means the power of the vision was taking in audio, wasn't taking in a sight, was taking in audio, which means it was doing the function of hearing. Pol pula feches was doing the opposite power, an opposite function. The kayach hashmiya, it was doing what the ears usually do, or what the power of hearing, of audio, of the power of hearing usually does. So it would seem more than just the essence. If I could stop right over here, and this is important, we might say that in order for the powers not to clash with each other, then which level of the soul needs to be revealed? The power of the soul in where the spheros, in which the kochos are hidden. Like we said earlier, eser kochos hagnuzos. The power of the spheros are in a state of gonus. They're hidden. If they're hidden, they're so subtle they don't clash with each other. But in order for each one to do opposite power, it would almost mean that they were undoing the nature of each one. How's that possible? Perhaps, and we're going to see later about this, it's because a level that was revealed during the giving of the Torah was even deeper than the 10 hidden spheros. Remember we learned earlier that the 10 spheros that are hidden in their source is a more external level of the Or Ein Sof. Because you could speak of 10 spheros, it's just that they're hidden. But there is a higher level where you have spheros Ein Kates. There is without an end spheros. So in the level of spheros Ein Kates, everything is possible. There's no definition whatsoever. It's not like there are this power and that power. And then perhaps, so over there's no power of chesed, there's no power of gevurah. It's like an infinite potential for anything. However, we might say, in other words, I'm trying to get the technical element of how it would work, that you have the powers, but the powers are doing a flip, and they're going completely out of themselves to do an opposite function. So what we would say is, perhaps, that the deeper part of the soul, the part of spheros, I'm borrowing a term from I'm applying to the soul a term from the spherot, because over there it's more, we discussed it specifically. So if we would say, for instance, in God himself, so we spoke about the 10 hidden spheros, but then we spoke a higher level where the Or doesn't have spheros at all, or if it has spheros, it has infinite spheros. So perhaps it would mean like this, that the level of the Or Ein Sof, where it's pre-spherot, pre-definitions, pre-chesed, pre-gevura, was released and revealed into the lower level of the soul, where there are 10 spheros. Since these spheros now touch the base with the power of the soul that's completely infinite, then that elevates them to a place where each one can do the opposite function. Similar to what we discussed earlier, that in order for Shammai and Hillel to switch their way of thinking, they have to go back to their teacher, to Shmai and Avtalion, and when they go into the source, and over there, they can walk out and suddenly Shammai looks like Hillel and Hillel looks like Shammai. Each one is wearing the other one's clothing. Because they go to a place that's beyond them completely. So perhaps we would say that the revelation at Sinai was not a revelation that can be used as an illustration to the 10 hidden spheros. Because 10 hidden spheros is at best coexistence. Not exchanging, not going out of their characters completely. In order to go out of their character completely, there had to be a revelation of even higher than 10 spheres agnuzes. Now, I'm saying that now because he's going to say that later. He is going to say that by the giving of the Torah, it was more than that. But the reason I said it now was because I think this gives us a better understanding of what his question is. The question is that we were trying to use and illustrate the state of the powers when they are at the very, 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 very beginning of beginning, when they're germinating in the soul itself. They're so subtle that they live in coexistence. And we were trying to give an example for that experience in an experiential way, that is the giving of the Torah, where the powers were so unified one with each other, they actually flipped. But he's asking a question. Flipping is more than just coexistence. Okay, so bear in mind what we just said, that it's possible that they flipped because they were touched by a power that's even higher than the 10 spheres being in their source. They were touched by the pre-sphere element of the soul, and that's what can lift them out of their nature completely. Yes, but again, let's hold that thought. Let's see if we can still save the idea that he said earlier, that perhaps the experience of Har Sinai, the experience at Sinai, was one of the revelation of the essence when it's carrying the powers, where the powers are there already embedded in the essence. And we shouldn't be bothered, because that's what he did use earlier in the discourse. And the question that we're asking now, but hold it, here it seems to be more than that, because we're arguing now that the power of vision heard, and the power of hearing saw. So perhaps he wants to say no. He wants to minimize now maybe the experience at Sinai, not to go so far. Perhaps we can say v'yesh loymar. He still wants to save the idea. Perhaps we can say shezeu gam kein rak pshitus hatzir v'hagbal. That in truth, when we say by the giving of the Torah, they cited the sounds and they heard the sights, right? They cited the sounds and they heard the sights. It's not a complete flipping of the powers. It's not an exchange of the powers itself. Because we will argue and we will say that we will maintain as follows. They saw. At the giving of the Torah, their seeing was operating. Okay? And with which power were they seeing? They were seeing with the power of sight. The soul has a power to see. Now, obviously we say the eyes have a power to see, but the eyes only have a power to see. The vision of the eye is the vision of the soul. The soul has a power to see. Now, the soul's power to see was operating at the giving at Sinai. The soul's power of hearing was operating. They saw, they heard. So the function of seeing and the function of hearing were taking place by the giving of the Torah at Sinai, and the power of seeing was done by the power of seeing, and the power of hearing. It's not that the power of seeing was hearing. No, the power of seeing was seeing. The power of hearing was still hearing. However, the range of what the seeing can pick up changed. In other words, the power of sight became far less limited. The power to see went out of the limitations of general sight. So what does that mean? So he's going to give us, it's going to be so special now, because we're going to have three approaches to what happened, the extraordinary experience of the giving of the Torah. Oops, we have to stop over here. Tomorrow we're going to see what, we're going to continue and do the first possibility of what happened, and we're going to have three different possibilities. Let's see. Be'ezras Hashem, we'll let Mashiach be here today. I didn't realize that it was 33 minutes already. Look at that. Time flies when you're having fun.